not being in church on Easter. So I think we got to do something special.
Yeah, and I think to bring all of us together would be really, really powerful, and it would give people that big Easter that could be in their living rooms in a very special way.
Yeah. I have an idea. I did something a few years ago on Jesus's women disciples. And since we're already in this, nothing is as it is or normally is, why not just carry that theme through to Easter? What if we did a series a tag team around Jesus's women disciples?
Oh. Wow.
Oh, I love it. I think that's a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Shall we do that?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. Good.
Good morning and welcome to the collaboration of our Easter service. We're so glad that you are joining us here today as we truly do celebrate community. My name is Reverend Cathy Jean Norman, and I serve at the Unity Church of Santa Barbara.
I'm Stacy Macris Ross from Unity of the Oaks.
I'm Nancy Norman from Unity Joy of Life.
This is Sherri James, and I'm from Unity of the Oaks.
I'm Reverend Knecht, and I'm representing Unity of Ventura.
This is God's new day. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Year after year, we hear the Easter story. It's a story of glory, of triumphant, victorious glory. It's a story that we're told year after year after year. The stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. The darkness of the tomb had vanished, and there was light. Jesus Christ, our way-shower, had risen. The stone had been rolled away.
Was it a morning like this, when the sun still hid from Jerusalem, and Mary rose from her bed to tend the Lord she thought was dead? Was it a morning like this, when Mary walked down from Jerusalem? Two angels stood at the tomb, bearers of news she would hear soon. Did the grass sing? Did the earth rejoice to feel you again? Over and over like a trumpet underground, did the earth seem to pound? He is risen. Over and over in a never-ending round, he is risen. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Was it a morning like this, when Peter and John ran from Jerusalem, and as they raced towards the tomb, beneath their feet was there a tune? Did the grass sing? Did the earth rejoice to feel you again? Over and over like a trumpet underground, did the earth seem to pound? He is risen. Over and over in a never-ending round, he is risen.
We all know the story of Easter, right? Jesus is crucified, and then he's taken to the tomb, and then he's resurrected. And it's the ultimate prison break, if you will. Have you ever heard of a prison break like that since? Probably not. He breaks free from death. And so on a metaphysical level, Jesus' prison break offers all of us here today a way to escape the solitary confinement of our little minds. You know, those little thoughts that just, they're negative and they just keep recycling themselves over and over and over again. And we become imprisoned by them. And so, like any good prison break, Jesus escapes from death, and it went undetected by the guards. And when the two Marys and Joanna arrived at the tomb early on Easter morning, the guards are still standing in front of the tomb. They're blocking the entryway. Neither the women nor the guards had any reason to think that Jesus' body still wasn't behind that stone. And then an angel appears, as quick as lightning, dressed in a white robe. Well, that's what we think, at least in Hollywood. And he goes, ta-da! And he flexes some angel muscle, if you will. And he goes, check it out, ladies. There is no one in there. Jesus is not in there. He has risen. So Jesus' prison break was a secret no more. The angel declared the announcement, he has been raised from the dead. And what we see is that Jesus' prison break enabled the women at that moment in an instant to break free of their own little self, maybe some of their mourning, or maybe some of their fear, or self-pity, their lack of faith. All of that had disappeared for them in an instant. Now let us remember something here, and this is very important. Jesus is an archetype for us. By his resurrection, Jesus proved to us a great spiritual law, that we are made of indestructible energy. And so there was more to this story. He had people in his life that loved and supported him, but people that you and I are just now discovering today. And so with that, I'm going to allow Reverend Sherri James to tell you the rest of the story.
Thank you, Reverend Cathy. Hi, I'm Reverend Sherri James, and I am really excited to be with you here this morning. I'd just like to give you a little bit of context for what you're about to hear. Women have always played a prominent role in Jesus' ministry. They traveled with him, they were healed by him, they were students of his, they were friends of his, and they bankrolled his ministry. And that's one of the things that sets Jesus apart from other holy men of his era. And so we figured, since everything is shaken up with how we do church today, we figured we would continue that theme with Easter and shake up how we do Easter. And so instead of bringing you the traditional Easter story, we figured that we would bring you the story of the women who traveled with and worked with Jesus. Now, we cannot tell you about all of the women, so we picked 4 that we thought that you would be inspired by. And so I encourage you to just sit back and relax. Oh, wait, no, don't relax. Get a pen and paper. You'll probably want to take notes for this one. But be open and be ready to be inspired by the lives of these remarkable women. You're going to hear about Mary, wife of Clopas. You'll hear about Mary, the mother of Jesus. You're going to hear about Joanna, and you're going to hear about Mary Magdalene. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Smitty from the Unity of Ventura. You're going to hear some beautiful music, and then we're going to dive into the stories of these incredible women.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, for the Lord God Almighty reigns. Hallelujah, hallelujah,
What would it take for you to live your life in such a way that they cannot erase you from the pages of history? Can you tap into your soul and draw out what lies so deeply within in such a way that when they tell the story of this moment, they cannot ignore your contribution? I mean, even if they have to lie on you and call you a prostitute, can you move through life in such a way that when they tell the narrative, they cannot omit you? Let me tell you about a woman named Mary from the fishing town of Magdala, one of history's most intriguing figures. You see, the ministry that Jesus led was called the Way, and it turns out that it found a way through the women, Mary Magdalene and the others who bankrolled the movement. Now, Mary clearly was independently wealthy because not only was she able to uproot herself and travel with this itinerant preacher, but apparently she also had enough money to fund it. And so one of the striking features about our Gospels is that they very rarely agree on anything. Was it 4,000 or 5,000 that Jesus fed? Was it the shepherds that went to see the baby, or was it the wise men? Was it the Sermon on the Mount or the Sermon by the Sea? Over and over again, our Bible disagrees in minor and sometimes major ways. But with all the disagreement, the one thing that all four evangelists do agree upon is that the tomb of Jesus was empty, and Mary Magdalene was either the first or among the first to see the risen Jesus. And so in Matthew chapter 28, it's Mary Magdalene and another Mary. In Mark chapter 16, it's Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. In Luke chapter 24, it's Mary Magdalene, Joanna, mother the Mary of James, and other women left unnamed. In John chapter 20, it's just Mary Magdalene by herself. In the non-canonical Gospel of Peter, chapter 50 and 51, it's Mary Magdalene and some of her women friends. Can I live my life in such a way where they cannot erase me from the pages of history? Can I tap the depths of my consciousness so thoroughly that 2,000 years from now, they will still be talking about what I did, what I gave, and who I might be? I'd really like for you to grasp what it means to say that Mary was the first to see the risen Jesus, and that he specifically commissions her to take that message to the other disciples. Because the central idea of Christianity is that Jesus rose from the dead, yes? So if Mary Magdalene is the first to see Jesus out of the tomb, and he commissions her to go tell the others the good news, how is that not something we talk about every Easter? I mean, we don't have an Easter story if Mary is not there to receive it and run tell it. Not only is she the original apostle, but she is the apostle of the apostles. And it's just too doggone bad that the word apostle conjures up the image of a man. Otherwise, what I just said wouldn't feel so much like a revelation. You see, everything about Mary challenges spirituality and the roles of women in religion. At a time when women were defined by their male relatives, Mary Magdalene is a woman who stood alone on her own two big spiritual feet. There is no man you can romantically connect her to, and don't think that they haven't tried it. And so now if they cannot make her go away, then they just don't highlight what's on the page. So the verse that explains the women funding Jesus's movement just never gets talked about. It just never is the subject of exegesis. The fact that the Gospels rarely agree on anything, but the one thing they do agree on is Mary Magdalene is the first to see Jesus risen, and that he specifically makes her an apostle just never seems to come up. And yet they cannot make her go away. Now, to simply leave Mary Magdalene in the past would be just as tragic as ignoring her story. And so I came to tell you that her biggest message for you and me is to live so boldly, so audaciously, with such spirit and such gusto that they cannot erase us from the pages of history. As we celebrate the contributions of her teacher, Jesus, let us shift our gaze just a little bit to recognize this powerful, unstoppable, indomitable tower of a woman that must for all time be recognized. Go forth from this day resolved that they shall not erase you, that you shall live these principles of truth so thoroughly and so completely that when they write the history of this moment, they must include you in the story. See, what I've given cannot be erased. What I've deposited into humanity must be recognized. I am an indispensable part of this universe. My gift will not let me be forgotten. When they write about what happened in 2020, they must include me in the story. And I'm not doing this for fame, because you see, the people who do it for fame are washed away with the sands of time. I'm talking about a deposit from the depths of your soul. See, when Beethoven opened up, God gave him the Fifth Symphony so that any child anywhere knows that song. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. That song was written 250 years ago. When Charles Fillmore opened up, God gave him unity. We sit here today feasting, chewing, passing the plate on what God gave him. When Myrtle Fillmore opened up, God gave her silent unity, we wisdom, healing letters. We are still dining on the gift God spoke through her. When Mary Magdalene opened up, God made her a woman, the apostle of the apostles. When you open up, God will flow through you in a way that they cannot erase, they cannot ignore, they cannot forget, they cannot overlook. You cannot be discarded. Live your life so that they cannot erase you from the pages of history.
When we imagine what it must have been like for Mary, the mother of Jesus, to arrive at the tomb, I think it's important to look at what led up to that moment. Now, I have often thought solely of Mary, the mother of Jesus, at the time of his birth, because that's when all the attention was given to her, because of course, she was the one giving birth. I never gave much thought to her role in raising Jesus and what it must have been like for her to see her son crucified on the cross. I also never considered that Mary herself might not have been a random choice as a mother of the Son of God, that perhaps she too was a chosen one. The spiritual story of Easter, like all of what is written in history, we have to pull together from the various stories, the versions, the perspectives of what happened, according to what other people thought. So I went poking around in the Bible and other sources to piece together a glimpse of who the mother of Jesus, who was called Mary of Nazareth, really was. There is little written about her in the Bible, but there are many other spiritual accounts, including 2 whole chapters that are devoted to her and her family in the Quran. Here's what I found. At 3 years of age, Mary was taken to serve in the temple in Jerusalem, and it's said that they placed her on the first of 15 temple steps, and these steps were symbolic of certain initiations. And little Mary climbed those steps with ease, demonstrating her preparation for the mission that lay ahead as a mother of Jesus in his lifetime. She lived at the temple from ages 3 through 14. Mary spent her time in contemplation, and it said that day to day, she became the spirit of humility and beauty that shone like the sun from her being. So that at age 14, when she and other temple virgins were to be given in marriage, Mary requested the rest of her life instead be dedicated only to temple work. But God had other plans, as we know. So in a way, Mary was the vessel for the coming of Jesus and a new spiritual awakening in the world. I believe the lesson here in this part of Mary's story is that any one of us, any one of you, if you walk a spiritual path, can create the conditions, be the vessel for God to birth a miracle through you. During the life of Jesus, Mary was not only a supporter of her son, she was a part of his ministry, a disciple who also believed in the message he brought to the world. In many accounts, it is told that the desire of both Mary and Jesus were that they not be worshiped. Instead, Mary desired that those who looked up to her and Jesus be themselves examples of a spiritual service to mankind. So, when Mary saw Jesus dying on the cross, I can imagine her grief, but also her understanding that her son was making a sacrifice so that something greater could occur in this world. And at the tomb, when she arrived with the other women to anoint his body with spices and oils and found him gone, and when the angel spoke to them, for Mary, it was not just as the mother of Jesus that she listened, but also she would realize the spiritual miracle that had occurred. She was a part of that miracle. This can serve as an inspiration for all of us, especially during this time in the world, is how we hold the higher spiritual truth, even when our personal lives are being impacted in ways that feel negative. To imagine what it must have been like in that one moment, experiencing the miracle of Jesus transcending death while suffering the greatest loss possible. To take that inspiration, and during the challenge of this pandemic that brings with it personal loss, to create your own spiritual conditions, to hold the perspective that perhaps is similar to the one Mary held, the paradox of accepting your own personal loss and suffering, and yet believing in and looking for the miracles that are occurring all around us.
Hello, happy Easter. I'm Stacy Macris Ross, one of the co-spiritual leaders at Unity of the Oaks in Thousand Oaks, and I'm here to share with you about Mary, wife of Clopas, one of Jesus' women's disciples. Now you may be thinking, what, another Mary? I know, there's lots of Marys in the Bible. So this one, Mary, wife of Clopas, was actually his aunt. Yes, she was the sister to his mother Mary. She was also the mother to one of his disciples. So she had some key roles in his life, and she presented at key moments in his life, such as when he was teaching in Galilee at the crucifixion and at his resurrection. So even though there's very little we know about her, it's enough to inspire us on this Easter morning. So, Mary, wife of Clopas, supporting Jesus' work, both with her time following him in his teachings in Galilee, but also with her money. That's right. And so we know, as documented in the book of Mark, that she was supporting him both time, money. Now, what were Jesus' teachings? Jesus was teaching throughout his lifetime that we are all divine. The Father and I are one. He was also saying from the book of John that the works that I can do, you can also do, and greater works than these. So we know from his teachings that we are part of that divine. Our nature is divine. That we're all therefore connected in spirit because we're all part of this divine energy, God. So we have certainly seen that in these times right now, haven't we, where we're all connected. Connected in, yes, collective grieving and trauma, but also connected in this invisible thread of love that's calling people forth to do and be their best, to stay home, to help their neighbor, to work in a hospital even though they may not have adequate supplies, to work in the grocery store, to supply food for their neighbors. And I've even seen children draw chalk drawings on the ground so we can be cheered up when we go outside for our walks. So we are all experiencing this oneness, this divine nature being expressed, the great works that Jesus taught and that Mary, wife of Clopas, supported with both her time and money. Well, she was also at his crucifixion, standing right next to her sister Mary. So she was witnessing this reminder that our old self, the outer world, dies so that we can fully express our Christ divine self. In other words, that when we observe the death of the outside, of the physical things, we can know that new ideas and new forms will emerge from this death. And it's interesting that she's standing next to her sister Mary, who represents love. It's the reminder that love is always with us. Love is what we can depend on during these times when the old is falling away and being replaced with new ideas and new ways of being. And we're seeing that right now. Right now we're seeing a death of how things used to be. We used to run around with our busy schedules and maybe think primarily about ourselves or just our intimate families. And now what we're seeing, what's emerging from the death of the old way of being, is this idea of slowing down's okay. In fact, it's good. Connecting with each other like we are right now. We're seeing people get creative, which is how God's Spirit expresses through us. We're seeing love for each other emerge in many, many ways. We also know that Mary, wife of Clopas, was one of the myrrh bearers. Now, myrrh was a natural gum or resin used to make ointments with. But metaphysically, myrrh represented the eternity of spirit, an ointment of love. Here's love once again, right? So she's walking to his tomb with this myrrh. And it's a reminder that the Spirit is eternal. It's the reminder that we can bring love to the old, to what is dying, and witness it rise up new, to a new way of being, to a new spiritual outlook. And lastly, being at the resurrection meant that she was tasked with the other women to tell Jesus' apostles. So she was an apostle to an apostle. Now, metaphysically, apostle means the spiritual thoughts going forth. So she was an ambassador of spiritual thought and bringing it forward. So during these times in particular, it's important that we're all ambassadors of spiritual thought. When conversations or posts turn to fear or worry, how can we bring spiritual thought forth? How can we bring spiritual thought to it? So today we have the opportunity to let go of those physical things that we get attached to and become more selfless, express more of our divine nature. We can learn from the Easter story that when old thoughts die, when the old way of life dies, which we've all been experiencing lately, we, like Mary, wife of Clopas, can support the rising up of the new ideas, the new life, and we can anoint it with love. We can know that love is with us in this. So this Easter, like Mary, wife of Clopas, believe in the power of love to emerge forth this Easter and know that your spirit can rise up to the calling to do great works. I know it can. Blessings all. Happy Easter.
Today, I want to talk to you about Joanna. As I look at this disciple, Joanna, I was just utterly intrigued by her. As I researched a little bit more about her, I could see that she was just a very strong, self-confident woman who really knew her worth. And let me tell you why. She was married to Chuza, and Chuza was the executive of Herod's household. Joanna evidently held a very high, a very significant social and political standing. Her husband was the manager of King Herod himself. You remember who King Herod was? History tells us that he was a cruel and wicked man. Remember, he killed John the Baptist. So Joanna's husband works for Herod, and yet here is Joanna with a group of women following Jesus. I wonder how her husband felt about that. Remember, Luke describes these women as women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Now remember, in that day and age, they didn't have names for the different ailments like we do today, coronavirus or anything else. Maybe Joanna had suffered a dreaded disease, possibly, or depression, or even menopause for that matter. Maybe her husband watched her helplessly as his beloved wife just kind of wasted away, and then Jesus happened by, and Jesus healed her and gave her a new sense of well-being. And now she traveled in the company of other women, disciples, supporting Jesus' ministry. Perhaps her husband approved. Perhaps he too had followed under the spell of Jesus. And therefore, the wife of a very important court official, she was very, very wealthy, and she would have the sufficient means needed to travel and to contribute to the support of Jesus' ministry. It was said that Joanna and a couple of other women had bankrolled Jesus' ministry. Don't you love that? Females supporting Jesus. Love it. Her name, Joanna, means Yahweh has been gracious. God has been gracious. And so you can see that God has been gracious to her. She has been healed by a very profound healer and teacher. She lives in the lap of luxury, and it seems that she is living in her own truth, not somebody else's truth. And she is following the teachings that resonate with her higher mind. And that was not common in that day and age. So this tells me that Joanna was someone who had a very high self-esteem, high confidence, high self-worth. You see, these women that followed Jesus did so out of an enormous sense of gratitude. They were not groupies. They were not crowding in to be near a rock star, if you will. These women had suffered emotionally and physically before they even met Jesus, and yet he set them free. Now they wanted to help him set others free. And so in today's vernacular, he liberated them. He liberated these women. Therefore, when we look at Joanna without backers like her, Jesus would not have been able to travel as far to speak and to travel as far to make a difference and to do the healings that he did. Joanna was instrumental in his mission. So let's talk about Easter morning and her role on Easter morning. Like the two Marys, Joanna stayed with Jesus to the end and beyond. Luke names her as one of the 3 women who visited the tomb on Easter morning, and she brings with her myrrh, which believe it or not, was extremely expensive in that day and age. Interestingly enough, if one is having difficulty or one is facing the fear of world circumstances, myrrh is suggested as the essential oil to use. And so she was bringing myrrh to not only bring calming to herself, but to her disciples, her disciple sisters, the two Marys. In Orthodox tradition, she is honored as the myrrh bearer, which I love that, the myrrh bearer. Therefore, as we look at Joanna, if you are feeling a sense of like you need some extra strength, just call upon Joanna. She'll be there. She'll give you that strength, that confidence, and that self-worth. Many years ago, Barbara Walters did a story on gender roles in Kabul, Afghanistan. And this was several years before the Afghan War. And she noted that the women utterly walked or routinely walked 5 paces behind their husbands. 5 paces behind their husbands. And then some years after that interview, she returned back to Kabul and observed that the women were still walking behind their husbands. Barbara Walters' observation, despite the overthrow of the oppressive Taliban regime, the women now seemed to walk even farther back behind their husbands and were happy to maintain that distance. They were happy to maintain that old custom, and so Barbara Walters was kind of perplexed. And she approached one of the women and asked, "Why do you seem happy with this old custom that you once tried so desperately to change?" And this one woman looked her straight in the eyes and she said, "Landmines." The moral of the story, as the author Timothy Anger said, no matter what language you speak and where you go, behind every man there is a smart woman. There is a smart woman. Yes, indeed. And so we must also acknowledge the men who were very brave to walk ahead of their women. Everyone has their role. Everyone has their value. And it just so happens that today we have been acknowledging some of the smart women that were left out of the history books and walked alongside the male disciples and never walked 5 paces behind. So with that, we are so very grateful to have presented to you the women in Jesus's life.
If you've received a blessing from this Easter service and choose to support one or all of the ministries represented here, simply go to the ministry website and to the area that says donate or give, and give your love offering or your tithe. In the meantime, let's just come together knowing that we're financed by God. We came into this world financed by God, and our every need is met abundantly. So let us just take this offering that you are going to be giving, this love offering, and know that divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Remember, you are an irresistible magnet for your greater and greater good. Generously we give, and abundantly we receive. I am an irresistible magnet to my greater and greater good. I'm an irresistible magnet to my prosperity. And you are an irresistible magnet to your prosperity. Thank you, God. and so it is. Amen.
I let the Lord lead me. I let His love guide me, and His Spirit strengthens my heart. I let His arms protect me, and His voice direct me to the place where I belong. You made the sun, you made the sunshine, you made the moon to make light. You know the plans you have for me, and in your plans I am free. You made the birds to sing. You are the Lord, you are the Lord of everything. You are the light, you are the light in the dark. Speak through me, speak through me. Flow through me. Help me see who I am. I let the Lord lead me. I let His love guide me, and His Spirit strengthens my heart. I let His arms protect me, and His voice direct me to the place where I belong. Oh, speak through me, flow through me, move my soul, make me whole, speak through me, flow through me, help me see who I am. Speak through me, flow through me, Lord, move my soul, make me whole, speak through me, Lord, flow through me, Lord, help me see who I am. I let the Lord lead me. I let His love guide me, and His Spirit strengthens my heart. I let His arms protect me, and His voice direct me to the place where I belong.
What an amazing and uplifting service that we've had. Thank you so much for joining us on this Easter gathering. We had so much fun and such an inspired time putting it together for you, and we hope that all of you felt that connection between all of our Unity Centers, from Santa Barbara to Ventura, down the 101 freeway to Thousand Oaks, and all the way out to Florida. So we truly are a connected Unity family on this Easter morning. So let's close our time together with prayer. Join me in turning within. As we pray, we say, Infinite Presence, we give thanks for this new way of gathering together to celebrate Easter. We know that Easter is not a location, but a celebration in our hearts and our homes. This morning, we have been inspired on a soul level to rise up to our highest and best selves. Learning from the women disciples, we know that we too are spiritual seekers and inspired visionaries, that we too have the strength and self-confidence to do what is ours to do, particularly at this time in history. We know that we can stand firm in our faith and our knowing of our divine truth, that with love, all things are possible. And on this morning, we affirm our divine nature as one with Christ consciousness. We remember the words from the book of Isaiah, who reminds us to be calm, to be not afraid, and to not lose heart. And from Zephaniah, the Lord your God is in your midst. Yes, we are love in the midst of anger. We are peace in the midst of fear. We are divine wisdom in the midst of worry. We are the hands, the ears, the eyes, the heart of God. Our spirits rise to this calling. So on this day, we celebrate our oneness with each other. We celebrate all things working together for good. We celebrate this Easter and the blessings it brings. It is in the spirit of allness, with full and grateful hearts, we claim this to be true as we say, and so it is. Amen. Amen.
Yes, there is peace on earth, and yes, it begins with me. Yes, there is peace on earth, a peace that was meant to be, with God as creator, family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Yes, peace begins with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Yes, there is peace on earth, and yes, it begins with
And now, if you will, join us in the prayer for protection.
The light of God surrounds us. We are the light.
The love of God enfolds us. We are the love.
The power of God protects us. We are that power.
The presence of God watches over us. We are the presence.
Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.
Oh, I am so glad that you guys are here with me. You know,
I'm glad we're here with you too, Cathy.
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I just needed a good laugh. But I woke up in the middle of the night and I.
This is now a blooper reel. Can you add this to the end, Jim?
Oh
This
my
is what
goodness.
happens, right?
Yes, there is peace on earth, and yes, it begins with me. Yes, there is peace on earth, a peace that was meant to be.